are these people?
And these are the kind of stuff that I feel like a lot of people miss because they're too focused on culture wars. Speaking of Disney,
Yay.
my little tribute to Star Wars in here, if anyone catches that. But this is from Caitlin Johnstone. We had a similar article from her last week, but this is slightly different bent. She writes, disrupt the culture wars. Keep breaking the spell and drawing attention to what's really going on, and you can stop out the abuse at its source. Okay? You with me so far, Care Bear?
Hey,
So,
with you.
one of the great challenges faced by Westerners who oppose the political status quo today is the way the narrative managers of both mainstream factions continuously divert all political energy away from issues which threaten the interests of the powerful, like economic injustice, war, militarism, authoritarianism, corruption, capitalism, and ecocide, and towards issues which don't threaten the powerful at all, like abortion, racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia. Okay? The method of social...
Actually, the way that she phrased... Hold on. Go back a second. I love how she phrased it here.
Uh-huh.
Like, any political energy that affects the powers that be. Those are the issues that we should be focusing on. So, versus the issues that the powers that be tell us that we should be focusing on that doesn't really affect them. So
Why I love
and
Caitlin.
especially right now, right. So that, especially with what you mentioned at the bottom, that's been the focus, especially with, both parties, in various degrees. That's what they're focused on.
Yep.
And, and even with some of our current political, sorry, not political, Democratic, not nominees, but candidates.
Yep.
Who are running to overtake Biden. Like, you can argue in various degrees, RFK and Marianne suck at a lot of the top in certain ways, but definitely like in terms of war in various degrees. They both suck in various areas of that, so
yes, they do.
And this is kind of like what I've had, not arguments, but discussions about online, especially with RFK, and that's why his capitulation towards Palestine, against Palestine, and basically being not even that. Let me take that back. He said he's a straight up capitalist.
Yep.
Straight up, he has said this. And Marianne, in not so many words, has also said similar shit.
Yeah.
None of them have an issue with it. They both think, it can be
reformist, if anything.
Right. So it's like, if they're calling for reformists instead of, that's not going to threaten the establishment. That's what they do now.
Yep.
It's just a lot of tweaking, but doesn't get to the root of actually fixing the problem. It's just a lot of tweaks. That's why they're promoting. So that's why, right. So that's why for me, it's like for Marianne and RFK, no, it's an absolute no for me.
No.
For that reason. So
no.
But yeah, so it's the idea that people are still supporting them, actively knowing, or maybe just out of ignorance or putting their heads in the sand, that they have said, I don't oppose capitalism. Like, as someone on the left, that should be your opposition, the main one right there, as long as the other ones. But even online, I see a lot of people who are distracted with the cultural stuff, like more so like trans issues now. I think that's kind of the hot topic right now, as well as abortion a little bit. But I'd rather get to the imperialism of it all versus those other issues, because if we get to imperialism, then I think everything else we can argue about, or it will kind of fall into place. You can't talk about like, let's say, trans issues and not talk about the injustice in terms of healthcare, racism, all those. Well, racism is kind of a part of it, but I can also argue racism is also tied to economics, especially in the West. So, so if we're not talking about the big issues, then we're not going to get anywhere.
Yep, I agree. Caitlin continues. The method of social control serves the powerful in some very obvious ways and is being used very effectively as long as it remains effective. It will continue to be used. The worse things get, the more urgent the need to fight the class war will become. And the more urgent the need to fight the class war becomes, the more vitriolic and intense the artificial culture war will become in order to prevent political changes which inconvenience the powerful. This is 100% guaranteed. And what's tricky is that all the vitriolic intensity will create the illusion that the culture war has gotten more important when in reality, the class war has. It's just a straightforward fact that the more miserable, impoverished, and disempowered the public becomes, the more hateful and all-consuming the artificial culture war will be made to prevent revolution. That's what's been happening, and that's what will continue to happen. You can hate hearing it, and you can hate me for saying it, but it is a fact.
We don't.
I think we are pretty much know it's a fact. Yeah, we don't, Caitlin. We got you. So, what's to be done about this? Obviously, it's not an option to just throw disempowered groups to the wolves and ignore. Hey, why not? Why not, Caitlin? Let's round up some wolves, baby. I'm down. Like those ones from Game of Thrones are around, right? So, and ignore the abuses they're suffering under the directed hatred coming after them from the right. And obviously, it's not an option to run to the other side of the artificial partisan divide and play along with the mainstream faction, which says we should focus only on culture war issues, as in Hillary Clinton famously arguing that breaking up the banks won't end racism and sexism. What? Huh? Like, she said what now?
The money is there. If we can save the banks, then we can save the world.
I mean, sounds like Greta, Hillary Clinton. As with most problems, the first step toward finding a solution is to bring consciousness to what's happening. Draw attention to the fact that marginalized groups are being used and abused by mainstream narrative managers to keep the public from turning their gaze on the abuses of their rulers. Draw attention to the way rightist narrative managers direct hatred towards marginalized groups to keep hatred away from our rulers, and to the way liberal narrative managers seize on that to direct their herd away from issues that can inconvenience the powerful and towards exclusive focus on the culture war. Okay? Stop.
Yep.
Stop letting people get sucked up into the performance and instead draw attention to what's really going on here. Act like a loud jerk at a movie theater who keeps yelling, "None of this is real." Those are actors on a movie set. Can you imagine how hard it would be to get lost in the narrative of a movie if somebody was constantly doing that to you? After a while, you'd stop seeing Oppenheimer and you'd only be able to see Cillian Murphy. Basically, all you're trying to do is take all the emotional heat that's being diverted into partisan feuding over issues whose outcomes will never inconvenience power in the slightest, and steer that emotional heat toward the people who are directing all this. This is both easy to do and completely honest, because how fucked up is it that they're doing this? How fucked up is it that the most influential voices in our society on both sides of the mainstream partisan divide are facilitating the abuse of marginalized groups in order to protect the powerful? It's about as loathsome a thing as you could possibly come up with. They're pitting human against human at the expense of society's most vulnerable members and watching them fight from on high like Greek gods. Can you think of anything more vile? What about you, Collin? Can you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Independent outlets that do this.
Yeah.
Because we're supposed to know better.
We're
and
supposed
we have plenty
to.
of colleagues on this space, and we have plenty of colleagues in the space that do this.
Yep.
So They do, and I think, and we talked about this. This is kind of like going back to the first segment. The idea that we're not talking about Niger in terms
Mm-hmm.
of the economic ramifications of what not will just will happen, in the global south, but how that will ultimately affect us in the West. That's
Yep.
the issue that we should be more talking about. Instead, what are we talking about? What was the hot topic today? Like
Yep.
I can't even tell you because like I think I don't even know, but like at least today, but it's not that,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I think at best everyone's still talking about the brawl
Marianne
in
interview
Alabama. The
and Matt.
Marianne interview, at least in this case, like I know you guys are just coming up from Jimmy,
Yep.
whatever else from that. And, you know, but it's like, again, for Marianne, it's like she's not attacking the establishment in the way that
No,
she she makes herself to be. If she
she's
says,
Cillian
as she
Murphy in
has,
this case.
oh, I don't have a problem with capitalism,
Yep.
then that shouldn't be a person that you should be.
They're
She's not
extensions of the
serious.
same duopoly that is the problem to begin with. Like,
Right. That's just in a nicer package to make it a little more tasteful
yep.
to lefty audiences.
And
That's
I'll
it. Nothing.
always draw attention to how disgusting what they're doing is. Draw attention to how deeply evil this behavior is. I'll keep shouting in that movie theater and drawing attention to what's really going on to highlight how profoundly depraved these monsters really are. Draw people's attention to this dynamic whenever you see it. When right-wing populists babble about LGBTQ conspiracies and shriek about wokeness, mock them for ridiculous sheep they are for playing into a dynamic that directly serves the elite power structures they claim to oppose. When liberals are ignoring economic injustice, war, militarism, authoritarianism, corruption, capitalism, and ecocide to focus on culture war battles whose outcomes will never even slightly inconvenience the powerful, highlight the disgusting way they themselves are feeding into a dynamic that imperils the marginalized communities they claim to defend. People on both sides of the divide will object to this message. The source of their objection is the exact programming I just described. The truth hides just beneath that objection. On some level, you all know this is happening. Keep breaking the spell and drawing attention to what's really going on, and you can stop out the abuse at its source. Great stuff from Caitlin.
She's 2 for 2.
2 for
Not to
2.
say not to say she doesn't write good articles, but the last two, this and last week's that you read from her, have been especially
Yeah,
good.
and I think it's mainly both of them were like, focus up, idiots. Like,
right.
Get your shit together.
Yeah. I think she's almost saying that knowing how people are seemingly
right,
like know better, and yet still are kind of playing into that spell again as we approach this upcoming election. That is almost like you've but just straight up forgot the very things that they were telling me before I even started doing this. Like, they're now like kind of capitulating to the things that they warned against.
Right.
So,
and we're just like,
snap out of it.
Right.
So
yeah, it's so it's just so a good reminder for us all. So
and I think
you,
part of
Caitlin,
that culture war is just politics itself right now. It's such a distraction for what it's capable of doing. And I'm looking at you right there, you. Stop paying attention to it. Not necessary. Not necessary.
Which is why I think, and this is for Reef and I, that's why very rarely, unless we have to, but if it relates to something
else more
that is
important,
we won't ever talk about those issues here. Not to say they're not important, but we want to try to elevate. And if other channels do it, that's on them. They can do it. It's their channels. But for us, it's like we don't want you guys to get so distracted that it takes away the conversation of what should really be important and what we really should mobilize about and what we really should put our full energy towards. Like, you know, it's fine to talk about abortion. I get the issue of abortion, but that is not any more important or than if Black people in this country cannot afford health care, you
Yeah.
know, or if there
Anybody.
is a rape or something
Right.
that that a Black woman is not going to necessarily get the justice that she would need on account of that, or in certain states are forced to have that baby, you know, which is affecting of health, which is again effective of lack of health care. So you can't talk about any of these cultural issues without, if you're really serious, without talking about the economics behind any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And often not a lot of the people that tend to distract you do not avoid talking about the economic aspects of these issues.
Yep.
So economics should be the priority for everybody. And then everything else, you can make your case within that. But don't go into the don't fall for the traps of just talking about trans issues or abortion. You know, race, I think, is kind of, you know, like, but just focus on race without the actual terms of class that goes along with that, which, as we
Yeah.
said, it's both.
Yeah.
I
It's
think, especially in this
always
country.
comes down to
So,
class. You know?
right. So,
So
class issues, maybe that should be our
yep.
focus.
I agree.
Anyway,
You know.
we are done.